The moment Austin Quinlan rode into Central City, Colorado, in the spring of 1878, he noticed her standing outside the general store, her face as still and empty as a winter sky, and he felt something shift deep in his chest that told him his wandering days might finally be over. She was sorting through a crate of potatoes with mechanical precision, her slender fingers checking each one before placing it in a basket. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and though she could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, she carried herself with the weighted gravity of someone who had forgotten what lightness felt like. Austin dismounted from his chestnut mare, tied her to the hitching post, and found himself unable to look away. He had seen plenty of beautiful women in his 25 years, but there was something about this one that caught at him differently. It was not just her delicate features or the graceful way she moved. It was the absolute absence of joy in her face, the way her lips remained pressed in a thin line, the way her eyes held nothing but hollow determination. You planning on standing there all day? Or are you actually going to come inside and buy something? The voice belonged to a stout man with graying hair who had appeared in the doorway of the store. Austin tipped his hat. "Sorry, sir, just got into town. Name is Austin Quinlan." "Robert Vernon," the man said, his tone softening slightly. "That is my daughter, Katherine. Kate, this gentleman needs help." Katherine looked up then, and Austin felt the full force of those empty eyes. She nodded once, set down the basket, and walked past him into the store without a word. No greeting, no smile, nothing. Just that blank, careful neutrality that seemed to take more effort than any emotion ever could. Austin followed her inside, his curiosity burning hotter than the afternoon sun. The store was well stocked, with everything from tools to fabric to canned goods lining the shelves. Katherine moved behind the counter and stood waiting, her hands folded in front of her. "I need supplies," Austin said, pulling out the list he had made before leaving Denver. Flour, coffee, dried beans, salt pork, and ammunition for a Winchester rifle. She nodded and began gathering the items without speaking. Her movements were efficient but lifeless, like watching a well-made clock perform its functions. Austin watched her openly now, trying to understand what had carved out all the warmth from such a young woman. "You new to Central City?" Robert Vernon asked, coming to stand beside his daughter. "Yes, sir. Bought a small ranch about 3 miles north of here. Previous owner moved back east after his wife passed." "The Morrison place," Robert said, recognition dawning. "Good land up there. You will need help getting it running again. Place has been empty near 6 months." "I plan to work it myself for now," Austin said. "I have done it before." Katherine placed each item on the counter with deliberate care, then tallied the cost on a piece of paper. Her handwriting was neat and precise. She pushed the paper toward him without meeting his eyes. $8.40, she said quietly. Her voice was soft but completely flat, as though she had trained herself to feel nothing while speaking. Austin counted out the money, but before he handed it over, he said, "Thank you, Miss Vernon. I appreciate your help." She took the money without acknowledgement, placed it in the cash box, and immediately turned to organize the shelf behind her. It was a clear dismissal, and Austin felt something stubborn rise in him. He had never been one to leave a mystery unsolved or a challenge unmet. Over the next 2 weeks, Austin threw himself into fixing up the Morrison Ranch. He repaired fences, cleared brush, patched the roof of the small cabin, and started planning what livestock he would need. But every 3 or 4 days, he found a reason to ride into Central City. He needed nails. Then he needed a new bridle. Then he realized he had forgotten to buy soap. Each time, he made sure to arrive when the store was open, and each time, Katherine Vernon waited on him with that same terrible emptiness in her face. He tried different approaches. He told her about the ranch, about the family of foxes he had seen near the creek, about the way the mountains looked at sunset. She nodded politely and continued her work. He asked her questions about the town, about the best place to buy cattle, about whether the winter snows came early in these parts. She answered in as few words as possible, her voice never rising or falling with any emotion. "You are wasting your time," Robert Vernon told him on the 4th visit, keeping his voice low so Katherine would not hear. She had gone to the back room to fetch more inventory. "My daughter has been like this for near 2 years now, ever since her intended died." Austin felt his chest tighten. What happened? Robert's face grew heavy with old grief. "James Hartford. Good man, worked at one of the silver mines up in the mountains. They were supposed to marry in the fall of 1876. Cave-in killed him and 3 other men just 2 months before the wedding. He paused, looking toward the back room. Kate was there when they brought the bodies down. She has not smiled once since that day, has not cried either, far as I know. It is like she locked everything away and threw out the key. "I am sorry," Austin said, and meant it. "So am I," Robert said. "I have tried everything. Her mother died when she was just a girl, so it has just been the 2 of us. I thought time would heal her, but it just seems to make her more distant. She eats, she works, she sleeps. But she is not really living, just going through the motions." Katherine returned then with a box of candles, and both men fell silent. Austin made his purchase and left, but as he rode back to his ranch, he could not stop thinking about her. He understood grief. He had lost his own parents to cholera when he was 18, had watched his younger sister die of fever 2 years after that. He knew what it felt like to have the world hollow out beneath you. But he had also learned, slowly and painfully, that life insisted on continuing whether you wanted it to or not. The question was whether you continued with it or just let yourself become a ghost. That night, sitting on his porch and watching the stars emerge, Austin made a decision. He did not know Katherine Vernon, not really, but he knew that look in her eyes, that carefully constructed numbness, and he knew that no one should have to live that way. He was just a cowboy with a modest ranch and no particular claim to wisdom, but he had a stubborn streak that had gotten him through plenty of hard times. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her find her way back to the living. The next morning, Austin rode into town earlier than usual. The store was not open yet, but he knew Robert Vernon lived in the house attached to the back. He knocked on the door, hat in hand, and waited. Robert answered, surprise crossing his face. "Austin, something wrong?" "No, sir. I wanted to talk to you about your daughter." Robert's expression shifted to wariness. "What about her?" "I would like your permission to court her." For a long moment, Robert just stared at him. Then he stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "You have known her all of 2 weeks. You have barely spoken 10 words to each other." "I know," Austin said, "but I also know what I saw in her eyes. I know what it looks like when someone is drowning on dry land, and I know I want to try to help her." "Why?" Robert asked bluntly. "You could have any woman you wanted. You are young, you own land, you are not hard to look at. Why chase after someone who might never be able to give you anything back?" Austin thought about it, trying to find the right words. "Because when I look at her, I do not just see what she is now, I see what she could be, and because nobody should have to carry that much pain alone." Robert studied him for a long time, and Austin met his gaze steadily. Finally, the older man sighed. "You have my permission to try, but, Austin, you need to understand something. I have watched my daughter disappear a little more every day for 2 years. I do not know if she can come back from where she is gone, and I do not want to see you break your heart trying to fix something that might be beyond fixing." "I understand," Austin said, "but I still want to try." From that day forward, Austin made himself a fixture in Katherine's life. He came to the store every other day, always polite, always patient. He bought things he did not really need. He helped Robert move heavy crates. He fixed a broken step on the front porch without being asked. And every time he saw Katherine, he tried something different. He brought her wildflowers, which she accepted with a quiet "thank you," and then set aside without looking at them. He told her jokes, which she did not laugh at, but at least listened to. He asked her opinions on things, and though her answers were brief, he treated each one as valuable. He learned that she had once loved to read, so he brought her a book of poetry he had found in Denver. She took it, but did not say whether she would read it. "You are persistent, I will give you that," Robert said one afternoon in early June. "But I am not sure she even notices." "She notices," Austin said quietly. He had seen the way her eyes followed him sometimes, when she thought he was not looking, had caught the briefest flicker of something, confusion maybe, or curiosity cross her face before she shut it down again. That evening, as Katherine was closing up the store, Austin appeared with his guitar. He had not played in months, but he had spent the afternoon relearning some old songs. "What are you doing?" she asked, pausing in the doorway. "Playing music," he said simply, and began to strum. He chose a soft, melancholy tune first, something that matched the twilight settling over the mountains. He did not sing, just played, letting the notes drift through the cooling air. Katherine stood frozen in the doorway. For the first time since he had met her, her carefully neutral expression cracked just slightly. Something that might have been pain or longing flickered across her face before she caught herself. "I have work to do," she said, her voice tighter than usual, and disappeared back inside. But Austin noticed that she took longer than necessary to finish her tasks, and through the window he could see her pausing occasionally, her head tilted slightly as if listening. He played for nearly an hour until the first stars appeared, and then he packed up his guitar and rode home. He came back 2 nights later and did it again. This time Katherine did not say anything, just went about her closing routine while he played. The third time, she brought a chair outside and sat on the porch, her hands folded in her lap, her face turned toward the mountains. She still did not smile, but she was listening, really listening. "What was that last song?" she asked when he finished. Her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. "Something my mother used to sing," Austin said. "I do not remember all the words anymore, just the melody." Katherine nodded slowly. "It was beautiful." Then she stood, said goodnight, and went inside. It was not much, but it was something. As summer deepened, Austin expanded his efforts. He learned that Katherine used to bake pies for the church social before James died, so he asked her if she would teach him to make a decent cobbler. She looked at him like he had lost his mind. "You want me to teach you to bake?" she asked. "I can barely make biscuits without burning them," he admitted. "And I have got a whole mess of wild berries growing near my creek. Seems a shame to waste them." She hesitated for so long, he thought she would refuse. But finally she said, "Sunday afternoon, if you bring the berries, I will show you." Sunday could not come fast enough. Austin spent Saturday picking berries until his fingers were stained purple and his back ached. He arrived at the Vernon house promptly at 2, carrying a bucket full of the plumpest blackberries he could find. Katherine met him at the door, wearing a simple cotton dress and an apron. Her hair was still pulled back, but a few strands had escaped to frame her face. In the afternoon light, Austin could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose, the delicate curve of her jaw. She was breathtaking, and his heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The kitchen was clean and organized, with copper pots hanging from hooks and herbs drying by the window. Katherine moved through the space with unconscious grace, gathering flour, sugar, butter, and a rolling pin. Austin watched her hands as she worked, noticed how they trembled slightly when she took the berries from him. "First, you make the crust," she said, her voice taking on a steadier quality. "You have to keep the butter cold and work fast so it does not melt." She walked him through each step with careful precision, and Austin followed her instructions as best he could. His crust was lumpy and uneven, but Katherine did not criticize. Instead, she gently took his hands and showed him how to fold the dough properly. Her fingers were cool and small against his, and Austin was acutely aware of the contact. She pulled away quickly, a faint flush creeping up her neck. They worked in companionable silence, and Austin noticed something shifting in the air between them. Katherine seemed less guarded here, in her own space, doing something she once loved. She still did not smile, but there was a softness to her expression that had not been there before. When the cobbler was finally in the oven, filling the kitchen with the rich scent of baking berries and sugar, Katherine poured them both coffee and sat down at the table. Austin joined her, cradling the warm cup in his hands. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly, her eyes fixed on her coffee. "Doing what?" "All of it. The flowers, the music, the visits. Why do you keep coming back?" Austin considered his answer carefully. "Because I think you have forgotten that there are still good things in the world, and I want to remind you." "You do not know me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then let me get to know you." She looked up at him then, and for the first time, he saw something raw and vulnerable in her eyes. "What if there is nothing left to know? What if this is all I am now?" "I do not believe that," Austin said firmly. "I think you are still in there, Katherine. I think you are just scared to come out." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, he thought she might cry, but she swallowed hard and looked away. "You should go. The cobbler needs another 30 minutes, but you can come back for it later." It was a dismissal, but Austin did not take offense. He had pushed hard enough for one day. He stood, touched her shoulder gently, and left. But he came back 2 hours later for the cobbler, and when Katherine handed it to him, still warm and wrapped in a clean cloth, she said, "Thank you for today." "Anytime," Austin said, and meant it. July brought scorching heat to Central City, and with it, the annual Independence Day celebration. The whole town turned out for races, contests, music, and fireworks. Austin had not planned to go, but Robert Vernon stopped by his ranch the day before. "You should come tomorrow," Robert said. "Kate will be there. She helps with the food every year, even though her heart is not in it. But maybe if you were there too, it will be different." So Austin cleaned up, put on his best shirt, and rode into town. The main street was decorated with flags and bunting, and a large platform had been erected for the band. Tables groaned under the weight of food, and children ran everywhere, their laughter filling the air. He found Katherine behind one of the food tables, serving slices of pie to a long line of people. She wore a pale blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and though her expression was as neutral as ever, she looked more alive than he had ever seen her. Austin got in line and waited his turn. When he reached the front, Katherine looked up and something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe even pleasure. "Austin," she said, "I did not know you were coming." "Would not miss it," he said. "What kind of pie do you recommend?" "The apple is good. I made it this morning." "Then I will have apple." She cut him a generous slice and handed it over. Their fingers brushed, and neither of them pulled away immediately. For a heartbeat, they just stood there, connected by that small touch, and Austin saw something shift in her face. Not a smile, not yet, but a softening, a possibility. "Save me a dance later?" he asked. Katherine hesitated, then nodded once. "Maybe." Austin took his pie and found a place to eat, but he kept his eyes on Katherine throughout the afternoon. He watched her serve food, watched her listen patiently to old Mrs. Henderson's rambling stories, watched her move through the crowd like a ghost at her own life. But he also saw the moments when she paused, when her gaze found him across the crowd, when something that looked almost like hope crossed her face before she pushed it away. When the sun began to set and the band started playing, Austin made his way back to her. She was cleaning up the tables, stacking plates with mechanical efficiency. "Dance with me," he said, offering his hand. "I do not dance anymore," she said without looking up. "You used to, though. Your father told me you used to love it." "That was a long time ago." "It was 2 years ago, Katherine, and I am asking you now." She finally looked at him, and he saw the war playing out behind her eyes. Fear and longing, safety and risk, the past and the possibility of a future. He waited, his hand still extended, and let her make the choice. Finally, so slowly it almost hurt to watch, she reached out and placed her hand in his. Austin led her to the space in front of the platform, where other couples were already dancing. The band was playing a gentle waltz, and he pulled her carefully into his arms. She was stiff and uncertain, holding herself away from him, as though afraid of the contact. But as they began to move, some old muscle memory took over, and she gradually relaxed. "See?" Austin said softly. "You remember." "It hurts," she whispered, so quietly he almost could not hear. "Remembering hurts." "I know," he said, "but maybe that is okay. Maybe it is supposed to hurt a little when you start to come back to life." They danced through 2 more songs, and with each step, Katherine seemed to sink deeper into the moment. She still did not smile, but her eyes lost some of their emptiness. She let him hold her closer. She let herself be present, even if it was painful. When the music ended, she pulled away and looked up at him. "I need to go home now," she said. "Can I walk you?" She hesitated, then nodded. They said goodnight to Robert, who watched them go with poorly concealed hope in his eyes, and walked slowly through the lamplit streets. Most of the town was still at the celebration, so they had the night mostly to themselves. "Why did you really come to Central City?" Katherine asked as they walked. "I told you, I bought the Morrison Ranch." "But why here? Why this town?" Austin thought about it. "I was tired of drifting, I suppose. I have been moving from place to place since I was 18, never really settling anywhere. When I heard about the ranch, something just felt right about it, like maybe it was time to put down roots." "Do you have family?" she asked. "Not anymore. Lost them all to sickness." Katherine stopped walking and turned to look at him. In the dim light, her face was all shadows and angles. "I am sorry." "It was a long time ago," Austin said. "But I understand grief, Katherine. I understand what it is like to lose the people you love. And I understand how tempting it is to just shut everything down so you do not have to feel it anymore. How did you stop?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. "How did you learn to live again?" "I did not have a choice," Austin admitted. "Life kept happening whether I wanted it to or not. But eventually, I realized that my parents and my sister would not have wanted me to give up. They would have wanted me to live fully, to find joy again, to honor their memory by making something good of the time I had left. Katherine wrapped her arms around herself. James and I had so many plans. We were going to have a home, children, a whole life together, and it all ended in an instant. How am I supposed to just move on from that? You are not supposed to move on, to move, Austin said gently. You are supposed to move forward. There is a difference. You take the love you had for him with you, but you do not let it stop you from living. A single tear rolled down Katherine's cheek, and she wiped it away angrily. I do not know how. Then let me help you, Austin said. He reached out and took her hand, holding it carefully. Let me show you that there is still beauty in the world. Let me prove to you that it is possible to be happy again, even when you think you have forgotten how. Katherine looked at their joined hands for a long moment. Then she looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw something that looked like hope in her eyes. I am scared, she whispered. I know, Austin said, but I will be right here. I am not going anywhere. They stood there in the quiet street, holding hands under the stars, and Austin felt something settle into place in his chest. He was falling in love with this broken, beautiful woman, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would spend however long it took to help her find her way back to herself. Over the next month, Austin and Katherine began to build something fragile and precious between them. He continued to visit her at the store, but now she would sometimes smile at him, small, tentative smiles that never quite reached her eyes, but smiles nonetheless. He taught her to ride his gentlest horse, and she took him to her favorite spot by the creek where she used to go with her mother. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, slowly peeling back the layers of protection they had both built around their hearts. Robert watched the transformation with cautious optimism. She is different with you, he told Austin one afternoon. I heard her humming yesterday. I have not heard her hum since before James died. But progress was not linear. There were days when Katherine retreated back into her shell, when the weight of her grief was too heavy to push aside. On those days, Austin simply sat with her, not trying to fix anything, just being present. He learned that sometimes healing was not about grand gestures or profound words. Sometimes it was just about showing up, day after day, and proving that you were not going anywhere. In early August, Austin invited Katherine to see the ranch. She had never been there, and he wanted to share that part of his life with her. She agreed, and on a bright Saturday morning, they rode out together. The ranch was modest but well kept now, with neat fences and a garden starting to flourish. Austin had fixed up the cabin, adding curtains to the windows and a rocking chair on the porch. Katherine walked through it slowly, taking in every detail. It is beautiful, she said, running her hand along the smooth wood of the kitchen table he had built himself. You have made it into a real home. It could be more, Austin said carefully. It could be a home for a family, if the right person wanted to share it. Katherine looked at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. Austin, I am not asking you for anything right now, he said quickly. I just want you to know that I am serious about this, about us. I know it is too soon, and I know you are still healing. But when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I want you to know that I will be here. Katherine turned away, her shoulders trembling. I do not know if I can be what you need. I do not know if I am capable of loving someone again. Austin came up behind her, close but not touching. I am not asking you to love me right now. I am just asking you to let yourself be open to the possibility. Let yourself imagine a future where you are happy again. What if I fail? She whispered. What if I try and I just cannot do it? Then we will figure it out together, Austin said. But Katherine, you are stronger than you think. You have survived the worst thing that could happen to you, and you are still here. You are still standing. That takes a kind of courage most people never have to find. She turned to face him then, and he saw that her eyes were wet with tears. But there was also something else there, a spark of the woman she used to be, fighting to come back to the surface. Show me the rest of the property, she said, her voice steadier than it had been. I want to see everything. They spent the rest of the day exploring the ranch. Austin showed her the creek where he got his water, the meadow where he planned to graze cattle, the stand of aspen trees that turned gold in the fall. With each step, Katherine seemed to shed a little more of her grief, to stand a little taller. She asked questions about his plans, offered suggestions, actually laughed when one of his chickens chased a grasshopper in circles. That laugh was like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was brief and rusty, as though her body had forgotten how to make the sound, but it was real. Austin stopped walking and just stared at her, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "What?" Katherine asked, self-conscious under his gaze. "You laughed," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Katherine's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with surprise. "I did," she whispered. "I did not even realize—" "Do it again," Austin said, grinning at her. "I cannot just laugh on command," she protested. But there was a lightness to her voice now, a playfulness that had been absent before. "Sure you can. Here, I will tell you a joke. What is the difference between a poorly dressed man on a bicycle and a well-dressed man on a unicycle?" Katherine shook her head, fighting a smile. "What?" "Attire." It was a terrible joke, and they both knew it. But Katherine laughed again, and this time it was fuller, more genuine. She covered her face with her hands, and Austin realized with a start that she was crying too, laughing and crying at the same time, all the emotions she had been holding back for 2 years finally finding release. He pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face against his chest, her body shaking with sobs. He held her tightly, one hand stroking her hair, and let her cry. She needed this, needed to let it all out, and he was honored that she trusted him enough to fall apart in his presence. "I miss him," she gasped between sobs. "I miss him so much, and I feel so guilty for laughing, for feeling happy, for wanting to move on." "He would want you to be happy," Austin said firmly. "If he loved you the way your father says he did, he would want you to live a full life, not spend the rest of your days mourning him." "How do you know?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. "Because that is what real love is," Austin said, cupping her face gently. "Real love wants the other person to thrive, even if you cannot be there to see it, and I have no doubt that wherever James is now, he is relieved to see you finally starting to heal." Katherine searched his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I think maybe I am ready to try," she whispered. "I think maybe I want to see if I can be happy again." "Then that is all I need," Austin said, and kissed her forehead gently. They sat on a fallen log by the creek until sunset, talking about the future for the first time. Katherine admitted that she had always wanted children, wanted a home full of life and laughter. Austin told her about his dream of building the ranch into something substantial, something he could be proud of. And for the first time since James's death, Katherine allowed herself to imagine being part of someone else's future. As summer turned to fall, Austin and Katherine's relationship deepened. They were inseparable now, and the whole town noticed the change in her. She smiled more, laughed more, engaged with people in ways she had not in 2 years. The haunted look in her eyes faded, replaced by something that looked remarkably like contentment. Austin knew he was in love with her. He had probably been in love with her since that first day outside the general store, when he had seen all that pain locked behind her eyes and known he had to try to reach her. But he wanted to give her time, wanted to be sure she was ready before he asked her to make any promises. In late September, they went on a picnic in the mountains to see the aspen groves in their fall glory. The trees were a riot of gold and orange, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. Katherine wore a green dress that made her eyes look like emeralds, and Austin could not stop looking at her. They spread a blanket under the trees and ate the lunch Katherine had packed: fried chicken, biscuits, apple tart, and lemonade. The afternoon was perfect, warm and peaceful, with just the sound of the wind in the leaves and the distant cry of a hawk. "Thank you," Katherine said suddenly, looking at Austin with those beautiful eyes. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for seeing something in me worth fighting for, even when I could not see it myself." Austin reached out and took her hand. "You were always worth fighting for, Katherine. You just needed someone to remind you." "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone again, but I love you, Austin Quinlan. You brought me back to life." Austin felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I love you too," he said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing outside that store, looking like you had forgotten what it felt like to be happy. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Katherine's eyes went wide as he opened it, revealing a simple gold ring with a small sapphire. "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards," Austin said, "but I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and I do not want to waste a single day. Katherine Vernon, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and making you smile?" Tears streamed down Catherine's face, but she was smiling, really, truly smiling, with her whole face lit up like the sun. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." Austin slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly for the first time. It was sweet and tender and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "When?" Katherine asked breathlessly. "Whenever you want," Austin said. "Tomorrow, next week, next year, I am not going anywhere." "Spring," Katherine decided. "I want to get married in the spring, when everything is new and blooming. Is that all right?" "That is perfect," Austin said, and kissed her again. They stayed in the mountains until the sun began to set, talking about their plans, their hopes, their dreams. Katherine told him she wanted at least 3 children, wanted to turn the ranch into a real home, wanted to grow old with him on the porch watching their grandchildren play. Austin told her about expanding the herd, about maybe hiring some help in a few years, about building a bigger house when they could afford it. But more than the practical details, they talked about the life they would build together, the love they would nurture, the family they would create. And for the first time in 2 years, Katherine felt like she had a reason to look forward instead of back. When they rode back into town that evening, Robert Vernon took one look at his daughter's glowing face and knew what had happened. He pulled Austin aside while Katherine went to put on coffee. "You asked her," Robert said. "I did, and she said yes." Robert's eyes filled with tears, and he grabbed Austin in a fierce hug. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked. "Thank you for giving me my daughter back." "I did not do it alone," Austin said. "She did the hard work. I just reminded her that she could." The wedding preparations took over the winter months. Katherine threw herself into planning with an enthusiasm that warmed everyone who saw her. She was like a different person now, still quiet and thoughtful, but no longer hollow. She laughed easily, smiled often, and moved through the world with a lightness that had been absent for so long. Austin spent the winter months preparing the ranch for his bride. He built an addition onto the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and a larger kitchen. He bought furniture in Denver, commissioned a beautiful quilt from Mrs. Henderson, and planted a garden that would bloom just in time for the wedding. Every nail he hammered, every board he sawed, was an act of love. They saw each other almost every day, and their love deepened with each passing week. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their losses, their fears and hopes for the future. They learned each other's habits and quirks, discovered what made the other laugh, figured out how to comfort each other on hard days. There were still moments when Katherine's grief surfaced. She would grow quiet and distant, and Austin learned to recognize the signs. On those days, he did not try to pull her out of it. He just held her, let her feel what she needed to feel, and was there when she was ready to come back. And each time, she came back a little quicker, a little stronger. Winter gave way to spring, and Central City burst into bloom. The date was set for May 15th, 1879, and it seemed like the whole town was invested in the celebration. Katherine would be married in the small church on the hill, with Robert walking her down the aisle and half the town in attendance. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with just a hint of coolness in the air. Katherine stood in her childhood bedroom, wearing the dress she had spent months sewing. It was simple, but elegant, made of white cotton with lace at the collar and sleeves. Her dark hair was pinned up with small white flowers, and she looked at herself in the mirror with wonder. "You are beautiful," Robert said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would have been so proud." Katherine turned to her father, tears welling in her eyes. "Do you think I am doing the right thing?" "I think you are doing the bravest thing," Robert said, coming to stand beside her. "You are choosing to live again, to love again, even though you know how much it can hurt to lose someone. That takes more courage than anything else I can imagine." "I am scared," Katherine admitted. "That is okay," Robert said, taking her hands. "Love is always a risk. But Austin is a good man, and he loves you with everything he has. You will be happy with him." Katherine nodded, took a deep breath, and squared her shoulders. "Then let us go get married." The The church was packed with well-wishers, all of them beaming as Robert walked Katherine down the aisle. But Austin only had eyes for his bride. She looked like an angel, all light and grace. And when she took his hand at the altar, he felt like the luckiest man alive. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life brought their way. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Austin kissed Katherine gently, and the church erupted in applause. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Katherine danced with her father, with Austin, with half the men in town. And through it all, she smiled bright, genuine smiles that reached all the way to her eyes. She was radiant with happiness, and everyone who saw her marveled at the transformation. As the sun began to set, Austin and Katherine slipped away from the party and rode out to the ranch, their home. The cabin glowed with lamplight, welcoming them, and Austin carried his bride over the threshold amid her laughter. That night, they came together as husband and wife, and Katherine felt the final pieces of her broken heart click back into place. In Austin's arms, she was whole again. She was loved, she was cherished, and she was finally, truly happy. The next morning, they woke tangled together in their bed, and Katherine looked at her husband with such joy that it took his breath away. "Good morning, Mrs. Quinlan," Austin said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Good morning, Mr. Quinlan," Katherine said, and kissed him. "I love you." "I love you too," Austin said, "more than anything in this world." They spent their first days as a married couple settling into their new life together. Katherine brought her things from town, arranging them in the cabin until it felt like theirs rather than just his. She planted herbs in the garden, hung curtains in the windows, and filled the house with small touches that made it a home. Austin worked the ranch, but now he had a reason to hurry home each evening, to share his day with someone who cared, to fall asleep holding the woman he loved. Summer brought long, lazy days and warm nights. Austin taught Katherine to fish in the creek, and she taught him to appreciate the small beauties he had taken for granted, the way morning light filtered through the aspens, the sound of rain on the roof, the taste of fresh bread still warm from the oven. They worked side by side, building their life together, and every day Katherine grew more confident in her happiness. In late July, Katherine began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first, she thought it was just something she had eaten. But when the nausea persisted for over a week, she went to see Doc Williams in town. He confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was with child. Katherine rode home in a daze, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach. She was going to be a mother. She and Austin were going to have a baby. The realization filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. What if something went wrong? What if she lost this baby the way she had lost James? What if she was not strong enough to survive another loss? But when she reached the ranch and saw Austin mending a fence, all her fears melted away. He looked up at the sound of her horse, his face breaking into a smile, and she knew with absolute certainty that everything would be all right. They would face whatever came together. "Austin," she called, dismounting and walking toward him. "I need to tell you something." He set down his tools, concern flickering across his face. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Katherine said, taking his hands. "Austin, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Austin just stared at her, his mouth falling open in shock. Then he whooped with joy, picked her up, and spun her around. Katherine laughed, clinging to his shoulders, and when he set her down, they were both crying happy tears. "Are you sure?" Austin asked, cupping her face. "Doc Williams confirmed it. The baby should come in late February or early March." "A baby," Austin said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." He dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa. I cannot wait to meet you." Katherine ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I am scared," she admitted, "but I am also so happy." "We will take care of each other," Austin promised, standing and pulling her into his arms. "You, me, and this baby. We are going to be a family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Katherine bloomed with it. She had worried that carrying a child would bring back memories of the life she had planned with James. But instead, it felt like a new beginning. This was her child with Austin, a symbol of the love they had built from the ashes of her grief. Austin was wonderfully attentive, constantly fretting over her health and comfort. He made sure she rested, brought her treats from town, rubbed her aching back in the evenings. He talked to the baby constantly, telling it stories about the ranch, about the mountains, about how lucky it was to have Katherine for a mother. As autumn painted the mountains gold again, they prepared the cabin for the baby's arrival. Austin built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Katherine sewed blankets and tiny gowns, her hands working by lamplight, while Austin read to her from his small collection of books. Winter came early that year, blanketing Central City in snow by November. Katherine grew larger and more uncomfortable, but she faced each day with good humor. She waddled around the cabin, directing Austin in rearranging furniture, insisting that the cradle needed to be on the other side of the room, then changing her mind again the next day. "You are nesting," Doc Williams told her during one of his visits to check on her. "It is normal, means the baby will be here soon." Katherine went into labor on a cold February night during a snowstorm. Austin rode through the blizzard to fetch Doc Williams and Mrs. Henderson, his heart in his throat the entire way. By the time they returned, Katherine was deep in the throes of labor, gripping the bedpost and breathing through the contractions. Austin stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. Labor lasted through the night and into the next morning, and there were moments when Austin thought he might die from fear and helplessness. But Katherine was strong, stronger than he had ever known, and she fought with everything she had. Finally, as the sun broke through the storm clouds, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Doc Williams held up the squirming, red-faced infant and announced, "It is a boy, a healthy baby boy." Austin laughed and cried, at the same time as Doc Williams cleaned the baby and placed him in Katherine's arms. She looked down at their son with such love that Austin's heart felt like it might explode. "He is perfect," Katherine whispered, tracing the baby's tiny features with her finger. "Austin, he is absolutely perfect." "He is," Austin agreed, kneeling beside the bed to get a better look. The baby had a shock of dark hair and unfocused blue eyes, and his tiny fist wrapped around Austin's finger with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" Katherine asked. They had discussed names for months, but had never been able to agree on one. But looking at his son now, Austin knew exactly what felt right. "What about Matthew?" he suggested. "It means gift of God, and he is, Katherine. He is the greatest gift I could ever receive." Katherine smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Matthew Quinlan, it is perfect." They spent the next days in a haze of sleeplessness and wonder. Matthew was a good baby, but he still woke every few hours to eat, and both Austin and Katherine stumbled through their days in exhausted joy. Austin marveled at how small his son was, how fragile and perfect. He held him for hours, singing to him, telling him stories, promising to teach him everything he knew. Katherine took to motherhood with a fierce love that surprised even her. She had worried that the fear of losing someone else she loved would overwhelm her, but instead, she found a strength she had not known she possessed. Every time she looked at Matthew, every time she felt his warm weight in her arms, she felt grateful to be alive, grateful for the chance to love this much. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought an explosion of wildflowers. Katherine carried Matthew outside to see them, and Austin watched his wife and son standing in the meadow, surrounded by color, and thought his heart might burst with happiness. "I never thought I could be this happy," Katherine said that evening as they sat on the porch, Matthew sleeping between them in his cradle. "After James died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never feel anything again." "But you did," Austin said, reaching for her hand. "You chose to feel, chose to live, chose to love again. That is the bravest thing anyone can do." "I could not have done it without you," Katherine said. "You saw me when I could not see myself. You refused to let me disappear." "We saved each other," Austin said. "You gave me a reason to build a life instead of just drifting through one. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, and Matthew made small sounds in his sleep. This was everything Austin had ever wanted a woman to love, a child to raise, a piece of land to call his own. And it was everything Katherine had thought she lost forever. The years that followed were full and rich. Austin expanded the ranch, hiring help as the herd grew. Katherine turned the cabin into a real home, adding touches of beauty and comfort everywhere. Matthew grew into a sturdy, curious boy, with his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn determination. When Matthew was 2, Katherine became pregnant again. This time, She was less anxious, more confident in her body's ability to bring a child into the world. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1882, and they named her Rose after the wild roses that bloomed along the creek. Rose was as different from Matthew as night from day. Where he was serious and focused, she was all laughter and mischief. She had Catherine's dark hair and Austin's quick smile, and she wrapped both her parents around her tiny finger from the moment she drew breath. 2 years later, another son arrived. They named him Samuel, and he was the most easygoing of the three, content to watch his siblings with solemn eyes and rarely fuss about anything. The cabin could barely contain them all now, so Austin built an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. The ranch thrived under his careful management, and they were comfortable, if not wealthy. More importantly, they were happy. Katherine blossomed into the woman Austin had always known she could be. She laughed freely, sang while she worked, and filled their home with warmth and love. She was active in the church and the community, known for her kindness and her excellent pies. But most of all, she was devoted to her family, to the life she and Austin had built together. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Katherine would stand at the window and look out at the mountains. Austin always knew what she was thinking on those nights. He would come up behind her, wrap his arms around her waist, and hold her close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked once. "Choosing this life? Choosing me?" Katherine turned in his arms and looked up at him with those beautiful eyes, now filled with warmth and love. "Never," she said firmly. "I love James, and I will always carry that love with me. But Austin, you gave me a life I never could have imagined. You gave me laughter and joy and 3 beautiful children. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning with a smile on my face. How could I ever regret that?" "I just want you to be happy," Austin said. "That is all I have ever wanted." "I am happy," Katherine said and kissed him. "I am so, so happy." The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing children. Matthew learned to ride and helped his father with the cattle. Rose charmed everyone she met and showed an early talent for music. Samuel was content to follow his siblings everywhere, his sunny disposition making him everyone's favorite. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Katherine back to the spot in the mountains where he had proposed. The aspen groves were golden again, and they spread a blanket under the trees just as they had all those years ago. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Austin asked, holding her hand. "I said yes," Katherine said, smiling at him. "You said you loved me. You said I brought you back to life." "And I meant it," Katherine said. "You did, Austin. You saw a broken woman standing outside a store, and you made it your life's work to bring her smile back. And you did. You brought back so much more than just a smile. You brought back my ability to hope, to dream, to love." "You did the same for me," Austin said. "I was drifting before I met you. I had no purpose, no direction, but loving you, building a life with you, raising our children that has given my life meaning." They kissed under the golden trees, and Katherine marveled at how far they had come. From that first day when she could not even force a smile to now, when smiling was as natural as breathing. From the hollow shell of a woman she had been to the wife and mother she was now. It had been a long journey, but she had made it with Austin by her side every step of the way. As the sun began to set, they packed up their things and headed home. 3 children would be waiting, probably having run poor Mrs. Henderson ragged while their parents were gone. There would be dinner to make, stories to read, a house full of noise and life and love. "Ready to go home?" Austin asked, helping Katherine onto her horse. Katherine looked back at the mountains one last time, then turned to her husband with a radiant smile. "Always," she said. "As long as you are there, I am ready for anything." They rode down the mountain together as the stars began to emerge, and Katherine thought about the girl she had been at, 22, so lost in grief that she could not see a way forward. If she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that she would find love again, that she would build a beautiful life from the ashes of her pain, would that girl have believed her? Probably not. But that was okay. Because Katherine had learned that healing could not be rushed or forced. It came in its own time, in its own way. And sometimes it came in the form of a stubborn cowboy who refused to let you disappear, who saw the woman you could be even when you could not see it yourself, who made it his life's work to bring your smile back. And what a smile it was now, bright and true, and full of all the joy she had thought she lost forever. Austin had kept his promise. He had shown her that life could be beautiful again, that love could bloom even in the darkest soil, that happiness was not something that happened once and then was gone forever. It could be found again and again, in 1,000 small moments, in the laughter of children, in the warmth of a hand held tight, in the knowledge that no matter what came, you would face it together. The ranch came into view, lights glowing in the windows, and Katherine felt that familiar surge of gratitude and love. This was her life now, not the one she had planned all those years ago, but the one she had built with courage and faith and the help of a man who refused to give up on her. And it was more than she ever could have dreamed. 20 years later, Katherine stood on the porch of the ranch house, significantly larger now than the original cabin, and watched her grandchildren play in the yard. Matthew had married a sweet girl from Denver and given them 2 grandchildren. Rose had shocked everyone by marrying a doctor and moving to Denver herself, though she visited often with her baby daughter. Samuel, still unmarried at 20, was helping his father with the ranch and showed no signs of leaving anytime soon. Austin came out to join her, moving a bit slower than he used to, but still strong and vital at 57. His hair was graying at the temples, and lines creased his face from years of sun and work. But to Katherine, he was as handsome as the day they met. "What are you thinking about?" Austin asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Everything," Katherine said, leaning into him. "I was thinking about the day you rode into town. Do you remember? How could I forget? You were sorting potatoes and looking like the saddest woman I had ever seen. I knew right then that I was in trouble." Katherine laughed. "You were so persistent, bringing me flowers, playing your guitar, teaching me to ride. I thought you were crazy." "I was crazy," Austin admitted. "Crazy in love with a woman who did not even know I existed." "Oh, I knew you existed," Katherine said. "I just did not know what to do about it. I was so scared, Austin, scared of feeling anything, scared of losing someone again, scared of taking that risk." "But you did it anyway," Austin said proudly. "You were brave enough to try." "Because you made me believe it was possible," Katherine said. "You never gave up on me, even when I had given up on myself." They watched their grandchildren play, watched Samuel lift the youngest onto his shoulders, watched the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. This life they had built, this family they had created, this love that had grown and deepened with each passing year, it was everything. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped that day?" Katherine asked. "If you had just ridden past the store and never looked back?" "Never," Austin said. "Because some things are meant to be, Katherine. I was meant to find you. I was meant to love you. I was meant to spend every day of my life making sure you never forgot how to smile." Katherine turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "Well, you succeeded, Cowboy. I have not stopped smiling since the day I married you." "Good," Austin said, and kissed her. "Because that smile of yours is my favorite thing in the whole world." As the sun set on another perfect day, Katherine and Austin stood together on their porch, surrounded by the evidence of their love, the ranch they had built, the children they had raised, the legacy they would leave behind. And Katherine thought about the broken girl she had been 43 years ago, standing outside a general store with no hope and no future. That girl could never have imagined this, could never have dreamed that a cowboy with kind eyes and a stubborn heart would walk into her life and refuse to leave, could never have believed that she would laugh again, love again, build a beautiful life again. But Austin had believed it. He had seen through her grief to the woman underneath, had made it his mission to bring her back to herself, had loved her with a patience and devotion that never wavered. He had given her everything: a home, a family, a reason to wake up smiling every single day. And in return, she had given him her heart, her trust, her forever. She had let herself be loved, had let herself heal, had let herself become the woman he always knew she could be. It had not been easy. Healing never was. There had been setbacks and hard days, moments when the grief threatened to pull her back under. But Austin had been there through all of it, steady and sure, reminding her with every word and gesture that she was not alone, that she was loved, that she had a future worth fighting for. And what a future it had been, full of love and laughter, of children and grandchildren, of sunsets on the porch and mornings watching the mist rise from the mountains. Full of quiet moments and grand adventures, of struggles overcome and joys celebrated, full of a love that deepened and matured with each passing year, that weathered every storm and came out stronger on the other side. As darkness settled over the ranch and the stars began to emerge, Austin and Katherine went inside, arms around each other, still as in love as the day they married. Behind them, the ranch glowed with light and life, a testament to what two people could build when they refused to give up on each other. And in the window, barely visible in the lamplight, hung a small photograph from their wedding day. In it, a young couple stood together, the man looking at the camera with proud joy, the woman looking at him with a smile that lit up her entire face. It was the smile of someone who had forgotten how to be happy and then remembered, the smile of someone who had been lost and then found, the smile of someone who had been given a second chance at love and seized it with both hands. It was the smile Austin had worked so hard to bring back, and it was the smile Katherine would wear for the rest of her days, a gift from the cowboy who loved her enough to wait, to hope, to believe that even the most broken heart could be healed. Their story became legend in Central City, passed down through generations as a reminder that love could triumph over grief, that hope could bloom in the darkest places, that sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply choosing to live again. The Vernon Quinlan Ranch prospered for generations, and every person who worked it or visited it could feel the love that had built it, could sense the devotion that had sustained it through good times and bad. But for Austin and Katherine, it was never about legend or legacy. It was simply about choosing each other day after day, year after year. It was about the small moments that added up to a lifetime, morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, hands held across the dinner table, quiet conversations on the porch as the sun set. It was about building something beautiful from something broken, about proving that happy endings were possible even when all hope seemed lost. And as they grew old together, still laughing, still loving, still finding new ways to bring joy to each other's lives, they knew they had found something precious and rare. They had found a love worth fighting for, a love worth healing for, a love that transformed them both into better versions of themselves. Katherine never forgot James Hartford, never tried to erase that chapter of her life, but she learned to carry that love alongside her love for Austin, to honor the past while embracing the future, to understand that the heart had infinite capacity for love if you were brave enough to let it open again. And Austin never regretted a single moment of his stubborn pursuit of the sad woman outside the general store. Every flower he brought, every song he played, every patient day he spent, proving his devotion, it was all worth it to see that smile on Katherine's face, to know that he had played a part in bringing her back to life, to spend his days loving a woman who loved him just as fiercely in return. In the end, their story was simple but profound. A cowboy saw a woman who had forgotten how to smile. He made it his life's work to bring that smile back. And in doing so, he gave her a reason to live again, to love again, to believe in the possibility of happiness even after unimaginable loss. And she gave him a home, a family, and a love that made every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment worth it. Together, they built a life that was better than anything either of them could have built alone. Together, they proved that healing was possible, that love could bloom in the unlikeliest places, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply say yes to the possibility of joy. Years later, when they were both gone and their children gathered to remember them, the stories they told were not of tragedy or loss, but of resilience and love. They spoke of a father who never gave up on the woman he loved, who saw her potential even when she could not see it herself. They spoke of a mother who found the courage to live again, who built a beautiful life from the ruins of her grief. But most of all, they spoke of the love that had sustained them both, the kind of love that was patient and kind, that never failed or gave up, that endured through every trial and emerged stronger on the other side, the kind of love that reminded everyone who witnessed it that even in the darkest times, hope remained, that even the most broken heart could heal, that even the saddest story could have a happy ending if you were willing to fight for it. And in Central City, Colorado, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the aspen groves and the stars shone bright over the mountains, people still told the story of Austin Quinlan and Katherine Vernon, the cowboy who made it his life's work to bring back a smile, the woman who found the courage to love again, the two souls who found each other in the Wild West and built a love story for the ages. It was a story of heartbreak and healing, of persistence and patience, of the transformative power of love. It was a story that reminded people that happy endings were not reserved for fairy tales, that real life could be just as magical if you were willing to believe in it, to fight for it, to open your heart to the possibility of joy, even after devastating loss. And somewhere, in the great beyond where all love stories eventually lead, Austin and Katherine were together still, dancing under golden aspen trees, her smile as bright as the day he first coaxed it from her, his love as steady as the mountains that had witnessed their journey, together forever, just as they had promised all those years ago on a spring day when a broken woman said yes to a stubborn cowboy and changed both their lives forever. Their legacy lived on in the ranch, in their descendants, in the stories told around dinner tables and campfires, but more than that, it lived on in the reminder that love was always worth the risk, that healing was always possible, that no matter how dark the night, dawn would always come, and that sometimes all it took was one person who refused to give up, who saw your potential even when you could not, who made it their mission to remind you that life was still worth living and love was still worth choosing. That was the gift Austin gave Katherine. That was the gift Katherine gave herself when she finally found the courage to accept it. And that was the gift they both gave to everyone whose life they touched, the reminder that even in the wild, untamed West, where life was hard and uncertain, love could still bloom, hope could still flourish, and smiles could be brought back to even the saddest faces by someone determined enough to try.